Greetings, everyone. This is Zakes here, and we are back with our weekly videos. And this week, we'll be talking about inflation. This is something that we have spoken about in the past, but as a brief introduction, right? What is inflation? Inflation is the increase in the money supply of a particular jurisdiction, leading to a general increase in prices due to the devaluation of that particular money as caused by, an increase in supply without the corollary increase in demand, right? So money was originally supposed to be tied down to productivity. So it would happen that when more gold is produced, and gold has other uses outside of it being a medium of exchange, when more gold is produced, there would be more money in the market if the medium of exchange is gold there. Thus, the productivity would always precede the increase in the monetary supply. And once we went off the gold standard, right, this is pretty brief, by the way, so please do forgive me if I'm just jumping over large tracts of history. But once we got off the gold standard, then it became normalized that, central banks can now increase the money supply without it being tied to productivity. And what that created is that you had more money chasing less and less goods because it was outstripping productivity. You had money being produced at a higher rate than the productive capacity of a particular jurisdiction, right? And then that leads to the devaluation of that particular jurisdiction's currency and then causes an increase in prices. The most stark example of this, right, that we should all be aware of, given that we are still, dealing with the consequences of that decision, particularly in South Africa, and the immigration talk is the hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, right? The Zimbabwean central bank pretty much destroyed the Zimbabwean economy at the behest of the Zimbabwean government because they just printed as much Zimbabwean dollars as they want. And now the Zimbabwean dollar doesn't exist because as we all know of the scenes, right, in Zimbabwe, of people carrying banknotes by the wheelbarrow and, taking them to go buy normal necessities like bread, like, food. And, an economy is pretty bad when you have to spend millions just to, buy normal necessities. But that is the effect of inflation because you can only think about someone who was already poor before hyperinflation in Zim, what happened to them when hyperinflation occurred, right? Their poverty just skyrocketed. And then that led to the mass immigration coming into better economies like South Africa. And we're still, as a region, particularly SADC, dealing with the ramifications of that decision. So that is the extreme end of what happens, right, when we allow central banks to run rampant without any form of control. And that is why we are such strong proponents of a sound monetary system, a monetary system that is, for me personally, tied down to a commodity. That way we have it tied down to actual productivity of some sort, and it would hedge, right, the possibility of having the supply of a medium of exchange outstripping the productivity of a particular region or jurisdiction, thus hedging against the possibility of a general increase in prices as caused by a devaluation of that particular currency. So that is me. I'm a gold bug though, right? I would ideally prefer it that we go back to the gold standard, and it has nothing at all to do with the with the amount of actual gold coins and silver coins I've managed to buy over the years, right? So yeah, another solution though, one that would be in line with the South African Constitution, because we must remember that the South African Constitution charges the Reserve Bank with protecting our currency, right? It is a constitutional provision to protect the rand, and that is the primary job of the South African Reserve Bank. Yet, as I have just explained, inflation is normalized, right? Inflation, even in South Africa, even though we don't have hyperinflation, we have normalized the situation whereby, 10 rands, 20 rands 5 years ago will not buy you the same thing it did today, right? So 20 years, 5 years ago buys you more goods than 20 rand in 2024. So 20 years, 5 years ago buys you less goods than a 20 rands in 2024. And that is the normalization of inflation, right? In South Africa, we have a Reserve Bank that has inflation targeting of between 3 to 6%, right? And the implication of having the lowest inflation target being 3% is that it normalizes the devaluation of the South African rand by 3% year on year, right? The Reserve Bank can say that it did a good job if it keeps the inflation rate at 3% because that was the lowest it gave itself. Yet the currency would have been devalued by 3% for that particular year. And the Reserve Bank said that it did a great job. And then we have to compare those, actions, the inflation targets and the actual actions of the Reserve Bank with what the Constitution says. And the Constitution is clear. It doesn't say that the value of the rand must be protected by only 97%, but rather it says that the value of the rand must be protected, right? And as such, the only logical thing to do is to have the lowest number in the inflation range target being 0%. That 0% would be in line with the constitutional imperative of protecting the value of the South African currency. And I would propose that, instead of a 3 to 6% inflation target, the Reserve Bank could try to have a 0 to 3% inflation target, right? Because the commodity gold standard may be a bit difficult to implement in an immediate sense, given the amount of changes that we'll have to partake to our general financial system. But I think that having, an inflation target that is between 0 and 3% is something that can be implemented much more quicker, and it will have the effect of, devaluing our currency less. That's meaning that the money that we do have will tend to hold its value relatively longer than it currently does. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is why sound money is so important, right? It's about the amount of money that is in your pocket and not the actual notes, but the value of that money, right? As we mentioned in Zimbabwe, they had a lot of notes, but the value thereof was eroded thanks to their central bank. And the South Africans, I implore us to think beyond the interest rates, beyond being concerned about whether, you'll pay a higher amount for your bond next month or a lower amount. We should seriously think about why. Why is it that things progressively have to be expensive? They don't have to be. Technology improves to keep on making things cheaper, but we have a modern society that automates and makes things cheaper, but the consumers who actually use these products and enjoy them aren't paying less for them, right? And I would say the cause of that disconnect between the producers and the consumers is the Reserve Bank, the institutions all across the world, right? Central banks that are responsible for making money and printing it. So please do tell us what you think. Are you in favor of us reining in the Reserve Bank and saying that, hey, stick to your constitutional mandates much more stricter, right? Limit your inflation target from 3 to 6 to 0 to 3, or rather just go full, gold standard? Are you a gold bug like me, or commodity bug in general, right? Instead of gold, you could say silver or whatever form. Or are you on the other side of the spectrum? Are you a proponent of modern monetary theory as an example, and you just want the state to print as much money as it possibly can, right? Please do tell me and everyone what you think below in the comment section. Give the video a like, share it far and wide, and as always, stay free.